ATJ Board meeting. I want to encourage those of you who are new to our group, if you want to introduce yourself either live or in the chat. And I see we have one new person who may be new to us.
Hi, my name's Hickory Gateless. I'm the new Deputy Director at the Northwest Justice Project. I'm excited to be here with you and glad to see those of you that I know and have worked with in the past, and looking forward to working with you in this new capacity, and appreciate being here.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you. All right, anyone else? So we've talked in the past about doing the land acknowledgement.
Hey, Terry, before we get
yes.
started, you have to remind everybody it's being recorded.
That's right. Thank you. That's right. So we are recording this. Thank you, Sal. Thank you, Bonnie. So I wanted to, we've talked in the past about doing the land acknowledgement, and we had said in our last meeting that we were working on the correct or the better way of doing it. Judge Keenan has given us a link, so I would like to do the land acknowledgement today. Would like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. So thank you, Judge Keenan. Okay, on the agenda, the first thing is approval of the November minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Sal. Second. Thank you, Michelle. All in favor of approving the November minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? The minutes are approved. Thank you. Okay. The ATJ Conference Planning Report. Vanessa Torres Hernandez.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see you this morning. So I, as one of the co-chairs of the ATJ Conference Planning Committee, have a 10-minute update to offer you about where conference planning stands and next steps. So I'm excited to report to you all that we have a theme for the conference that will be held virtually in August. There may be some very minor wordsmithing to this, but our overall theme is Crisis and Reckoning, a call to dismantle unjust systems. And the Planning Committee as a whole chose that theme because what we really want to focus on in the upcoming conference is the opportunity to reckon with the impacts of the current crisis and the way in which both the COVID-19 crisis and the national reckoning with systemic racism have laid bare some of the existing inequities in our society and in our justice system in particular. So we are really hoping to take this opportunity not just to acknowledge the differential impacts of these crises on our communities, but also really to work practically to identify steps that all of us who work within the justice system and all of the community partners we are hoping to bring into the conference can practically rebuild and change our systems of justice to be more responsive to our communities and to work us closer to shared ideals. So we are all really excited about the work ahead. In immediate steps, the two things that we are focusing on are putting out a request for proposals. And we'll be putting that out in mid-January with the deadline for proposals to be submitted, Bonnie, I believe by the end of February, correct? And we're really looking both to send out proposals to members of the request for proposals to members of the legal community, but also to, as the past the 2019 conference did, really emphasize outreach to communities that are directly impacted by the justice system, and have those folks be working as equal partners and presenters in the conference, so that we're all able to learn from the wisdom in our communities as well as the wisdom within our legal system. So we'll be sending out that RFP very broadly in mid-January, and again would really welcome all of your support in helping us to disseminate it and make sure that we bring in a wonderful slate of presenters. The other thing that I wanted to highlight for all of you is that we have been having a lot of conversations about outreach and accessibility for this conference, not just because it's a virtual format, which both creates opportunity, right? Folks don't have to travel all across the state in order to attend, but also creates some hurdles for people who may live in areas where they don't have access to reliable technology, or for people who have other barriers to participating in a 2-day long Zoom conference. So there are two things that we are really working hard on. One is trying to ensure that we're selecting a platform for the conference that we can, make accessible as much as is possible, and also thinking about how we build local accessibility supports across the state, even as we'll be primarily in a virtual format. And then the other thing that we are really working on is our fundraising committee is going to be putting a special eye towards trying to ensure that we are able to fundraise so that we can provide stipends and compensation for impacted community members who are presenting at the conference, to compensate them really for sharing their expertise and experience with us. Right now, we are looking at, trying to do that for folks who have been directly impacted by the justice system, or participation within the justice system, who don't otherwise work in organizations that are justice system services. And we're hoping to use Just Lead's general rate of compensation for community members at about $75 an hour. So that's a new challenge for our fundraising committee, but a commitment that, again, we think is important against both the overall goals of the conference to be inclusive of community, accessible, and equitable, and which we also think is responsive to the current moment. So with that quick summary, Francis, I don't know, as an active participant in all of this, if you have anything to add, but otherwise I'm happy to take questions.
No, you cover it all, Vanessa. Thank you. Any questions, clarifications, comments for Vanessa? Judge Bradley, and then SP.
Thanks for the report, Vanessa. Can you just remind me what the title of the conference is?
Yes, and I'm putting it in the chat right now. It is Crisis and Reckoning, a call to dismantle unjust systems.
Thank you.
Thank you. SP?
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. That was great. My question is about the RFP. Well, all of it is outreach, right? The RFP and the outreach for the community and the fundraising. It's all. So can you say a little bit more how you're reaching out to and identifying who?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so that is really going to be one of the primary tasks of our outreach and accessibility subcommittee. So that subcommittee is chaired by a community member, so not someone who works within the justice system. In Spokane, Nikki Lockwood, who's an education activist who's also on the school board. And so what that committee has done is kind of identify at a high level 3 major constituencies for this conference. One is folks who work within the justice system. 2 are policymakers who make policy around the justice system. And then the 3rd are community groups who are directly impacted by the justice system. In terms of identifying within each of those subpopulations who exactly we're going to be pushing the RFP out to, the committee hasn't gone through that exercise yet. We have some preliminary outreach spreadsheets and documents, and but that needs to get populated over the next month and a half or so. Right now, the conversation has been centering around identifying both sort of regional outreach lists and then population specific outreach lists, and really relying upon folks' networks to help identify who we should be engaged with. We're really, I think, grateful that so many of the folks who are on our outreach and accessibility subcommittee are not lawyers and not legal professionals, which is giving us an opportunity to step back from our ordinary framework and to try to consider different ways. So for example, one of the things we're talking about is modifying to have a sort of short form RFP, which may be more accessible to community members and where we can highlight some of the things that are most important to people who are impacted by the systems, rather than the long form RFP, which we've more traditionally used and which we'll still produce for members of the legal community. So some of that is we don't know yet, but yeah, I would welcome any ideas you have, SB. I know you're wonderful at that effort.
Just as a follow-up, the work that the ATJ board is doing, and that a lot of Alliance members, some that are on this call right now, are doing around engaging community voices and making sure that voice that has been absent for so long within the dialogues and discussions on anything having to do with our justice system, we're changing that, right? The landscape is moving and it's changing. And so I think it would be helpful to maybe as you're going through this process, keeping track of what is the experience that you've had in engaging community, and what are the lessons learned? What are the things that worked and didn't work? And maybe later on share that. Because I think that the learning process also is the process, right? It's a new process. And we're trying to figure out ourselves to be able to do that, but also how do we take that and have it be something that's shareable, that become lessons for the broader legal community, and not just going, okay, we did a conference, but you did a conference that engaged the community, and the community is involved in it. So what worked, what didn't, that kind of thing. So maybe later on down the road, that could be included.
That sounds like an excellent idea. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have 2 reports, but Marv needs to leave by 11 a.m. Jim needs to leave by 10:28. So I'm sorry, Merv. We're going to move Jim quickly up so that Jim can give his report. Thank you, Merv. Merv is my partner and my colleagues and my collaborators. Okay, Jim, you have the floor for your report on eviction prevention services.
Thank you, and allow me to apologize to Murph. I'm sorry, but I'm like back-to-back triple during this time slot. And one of those meetings is a meeting where I believe Edmund and I will both participate in. It's a meeting with Senator Patty Kuderer, who will be the lead author of eviction defense and tenants' rights legislation in the coming legislative session. So let me just start there. We have been working with the senator, as have others, including representatives of the rental housing industry, the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, HJP, OCLA, and a number of others. The senator, I think, it's fair to say, is strongly committed to fundamentally altering the unlawful detainer process, to creating opportunities for collaborative resolution prior to judicial hearings on applications for writs of restitution, for ensuring the availability of meaningful rent assistance funding, and ensuring that there is some clarity of expectation as it relates to what a reasonable payment plan is within the meaning of current law, and also to significantly expand the availability of counsel, if not create a right to counsel for people against whom unlawful detainer cases have been filed. We're meeting again at 11 o'clock, so that is, as I say, it's all in flux. Nobody's actually seen or agreed on final bill language, but I guarantee you that you're going to see either legislation pre-filed or filed extraordinarily early in session and moved quickly as the circumstances allow. The eviction resolution program, which the center has been very interested in following, was funded and is now operational in the 6 pilot counties, Snohomish, King, Pierce, Thurston, Clark, and Spokane. We're kind of shaking off a few of the early cobwebs and trying to achieve kind of consistency of understanding of how it works. We meet with the point judges or judicial officers in the 6 pilot counties every Friday morning. We had our meeting this morning where we got updates on the number of cases. Well over 500 cases have been initiated under the ERPs in the pilot counties. Some are more active than others. There are some issues kind of in terms of dispute resolution center protocol and understanding and interpretation of their role. We're still working that out with the representatives from Resolution Washington. But we've had extraordinarily good press coverage on it and increasing use of it. And we look forward, even during this moratorium period, we're looking forward to increasing utilization as landlords and tenants try to find ways out of a difficult situation for both. And I think that we can all be pleased with the anticipated arrival of yet another dose of federal rent assistance funding in the bill that has yet to be agreed upon, but will by the end of the weekend. So that will continue to help a lot in our state. And then there's finally the question of the moratorium. I'm sure you all read that Mayor Durkin extended the King County moratorium through March 31st. I think, Edmund, you should feel free to explain how that operates and the 6-month period thereafter. I'm still waiting for final word from the governor's office as to when and for how long the state moratorium will be extended. Nobody anticipates that it will be lifted effective January 1st, given the consensus both at the federal and state level that mass evictions would compound the public health crisis that we're facing. Edmund, what did I miss? Oh, did he leave? Or is he still here? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty accurate. Nice, good statewide narrative of what actually is going on right now in the kind of situation.
Any comments for Jim or question for Jim on the eviction prevention services?
Great, thank you.
Judge Bradley? Sorry, Jim, you can't go yet. Judge Bradley, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you, Jim, for your tireless efforts. I know this has been a particularly long year for all of us, but especially you. So thank you for fighting the good fight and staying the course.
Well, thank you. Everybody's fighting the good fight.
Thank you, Jim. All right, we go on to, in the absence of any more comments, we go on to Murph for the update from Alliance Providers Columbia Legal Services.
Hi, yes, I was asked to focus on COVID and our work around that and what's been happening since I was here about 6 months ago. So I'm going to talk about 5 areas: our work with people in prison, our work in the Wenatchee Valley around some of the reopening issues that have happened there, our work around workers who are undocumented, our benefits for people who are undocumented, and a vaccine. And I'm going to do it in less than 10 minutes. Okay. So things have gotten really, really horrible, awful. There's a crisis again in the Department of Corrections. Right now, there's more than 3,800 cases. There's been huge surges. There's also been surges in work release programs. One work release program, Bishop Reynolds, had 75% of men who were there test positive for COVID. 37 out of 49 people. We are getting and have been getting over 100+ calls and letters a day. We have hired an intake worker to help us handle that volume of calls. We set up a Google phone account so folks can answer all the calls that are coming in from people in prison and their families. People are fairly terrified about getting sick. When some folks in prison get sick, they're put into solitary confinement, which in and of itself is considered by some to be torture, and then to have COVID and be incredibly sick and be in solitary confinement is pretty horrible. We're continuing to investigate the current conditions and figuring out what legal action we may take to address those conditions. The other problem is that people are being transferred from work release or within the prison, and they're getting lost. Their families can't find them and don't know where they are. There's very little access to folks to find it out. There's issues with overcrowding. There's issues with hygiene. We had a press conference on Monday. Over 190 folks attended. That was community led by people most impacted and their families with that work. The other big issue that happened is there was a national class action lawsuit out of California to get stimulus funds to people in prison. There was a court ruling that said, yes, people could get those stimulus funds, but they only had less than 2 weeks to do that. We got involved with folks in Washington to make sure folks in prison got those stimulus checks. We had 2 advocates working on that to help get the forms filled out. There were lots of issues about getting the forms to people. Some of them could do it online, some could not. There were different deadlines for that. There were some complicated tax questions that people in prison and their families had. We partnered with attorneys at K&L Gates who took that work on pro bono. And so many folks who are in prison and their families will be getting those checks, which will be really helpful. So that's the prison work. We work with a group in the Wenatchee Valley, ISLG, the Immigrant and Solidarity Network. They were concerned about the pre-opening a few months ago. And so we did a public records request to find out about that. And it turned out there were some pretty dicey emails about pressure from politicians and business on that district to open early, even though the public health guidance was not to do so. As a result of publicity and media coverage of that, they have decided to hire an administrator for that health district that has a public health background, which is really exciting, basic, but exciting. And we continue to support that group and to monitor that work. For workers, including workers who are undocumented, H-2A workers who are here on a limited visa, there has been some horrible conditions, particularly in the fruit packing warehouses. Folks in those warehouses have started to organize, and we're supporting that. We filed claims with the National Labor Relations Board, had a 3-day hearing to try to get union recognition for those workers organizing for better conditions, including disinfecting and personal protective equipment. We also are concerned about ventilation and housing for H-2A workers currently and going forward as the workers will come back in the spring and summer. We continue to advocate administratively and may file future litigation around that. We filed emergency rulemaking to get enforceable rules for H-2A workers around COVID. We put together a benefits document that sets out all the benefits available to folks. We continue to update that. It's in several languages. We did a presentation on Facebook Live, and so far there's been over 1,000 viewings of that, and that document is on our website. We also are monitoring the vaccine, particularly for farm workers and people in prison. Right now, for people in prison, those folks are considered stage 2. We made comments on the national vaccine release program saying that people in prison needed to be considered. And at the same time, community members have told us that they're concerned about being guinea pigs or being test subjects. So we're also trying to balance getting the vaccine distributed and safety for folks who will be among the first people to receive it. So pretty close to 10 minutes. I think there's still time for questions.
Thank you, Murph. Questions, comments, clarifications for Murph? SP, do you have? Yes, go ahead, SP.
I don't have any questions. I just want to know where I can take the Murph course on presenting your information in a concise and limited time. I mean, that,
You need
You're
to
up
come
on
and
the East
see her.
Coast. Talk
You need
fast.
to come and see her on Disco. She is excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for your
Merv.
presentation.
Thank you. I got a lot of thank you also in the chat room for you. Thank you, Merv. Now we're going to go to Edmund on update from Alliance Providers Housing Justice Projects. Edmund?
Hi all. Well, thanks for having me. So I'm Edmund Witter from the Housing Justice Project in King County at the King County Bar, he, him. So I think I was asked to just sort of give an update about what we're seeing, at least from our clients, and what kind of work we're doing right now. One thing I'll just point out to you, and I'll put in the chat, is we've been tracking every single eviction filing in King County since April 1st and when COVID started. We put a lot of other information that's currently not on the website, including tracking whether we represented the tenant, what was the outcome, what ultimately happened, and some follow-up information that we hope to publicize later. But it's been just a sort of a long sort of held dream to sort of get better data on what types of evictions are happening, where they're happening. We hope to keep this project going. We're also going to put up prior years data in a lot of detail to just sort of give a better sense of where evictions are happening and why they're happening. But as you can see, we've had about 200 evictions since April 1st. And I would have thought that there would have been a lot less work because in normal years, we have about 4,500 filings in King County, but it's actually been a lot more work, partially because of the way the courts are now handling these as virtual hearings. We've had to do a lot of telephonic hearings, Zoom hearings. We've had a telephonic hearing trial where our client's phone died in about 15 minutes into it, and we had no idea. And we asked him to testify on something and we just got silence, which was not great. And he had no way to inform us about that. So there's been a lot of problems about trying to work with the court to try to make a better setting for our clients. It's more accommodating. But overall, things are moving along as they normally would. I think what we're doing, like every other HJP, is trying to prepare for the inevitable onslaught of number of cases that might be coming down the pipeline. For the last month or so, we've been operating a rental assistance program, which has been part of the mediation project that Jim Bamberger mentioned. And we've distributed so far about $1.6 million in rental assistance to households in King County who are in need. That's been, we hope, will put a dent into what we would otherwise would have seen as evictions coming in next year. But that's ultimately been pretty big as far as a project and an undertaking on our part. But at the same time, we've been dealing with a lot of just new legal issues that have been coming up. We have a case currently at the Washington Supreme Court on about the Centers for Disease Control moratorium and its impact on the state moratorium. But we've also just seen a lot of illegal lockouts, and we've seen a lot more harassment issues among landlords. In particular, we just had one family that came to us yesterday whose ceiling collapsed and the landlord changed the locks. It was actually a big landlord, not even a small one, which we typically see this type of illegal activity, who just changed the locks and said, well, the tenant had this come in. They didn't pay their rent for about 9 months and they were refusing to let the tenant back in. So we're now preparing a lawsuit on that. And we've just been getting that multiple times a week now. And it's been pretty routine at this point. So we've had to change our practice to just a new norm now, which is a lot of the cases that we do see, frankly, almost all of them are highly intensive, behavior related. We've had a lot of clients with just extreme mental health issues and trying to navigate this sort of virtual clinic or virtual court setting that we currently have. But then secondly, trying to deal with a lot of just the harassment that we're seeing on the other side of it. We don't normally see a ton of illegal lockouts, but they've just grown exponentially in the last few months. And we've just sort of seen that kind of frustration or whatever it is, and just resort to other illegal means to be able to get rid of tenants who maybe aren't wanted or maybe are struggling and just haven't been able to get the right assistance at this point. So it's been a fairly busy, I think, kind of teeth-shattering year, I think, for everyone. And I think as far as what comes next year is we're just in a holding pattern right now. I think everybody who's doing tenant work is just sort of waiting on what's going to happen next year. What are we going to hear from the governor? What is the federal government going to do? Is there going to be rental assistance available? And frankly, after this year, there's really not much in the way of rental assistance available for pretty much anybody across the state until either the state legislature or the federal government appropriates money for it. And that still remains to be seen. I don't know if that's, yeah, if people have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All right, there's a couple of questions. Judge Corbett and SP.
Edmund, I was wondering, maybe it'll only be anecdotal, but do you see similar problems east of the Cascades?
Yeah, actually, one of the interesting things is Spokane in particular has had a really high filing rate of eviction filings. Normally, the top 5 counties are King County, then Pierce, then Snohomish, then Clark, then Spokane. But Spokane at certain times has exceeded King County in the number of filings that have occurred. And there's not as much legal support out there as there are in like sort of around the Puget Sound region, which is pretty disheartening. But the anecdotes that I've heard from tenant advocates there and the attorneys out there, it's just a lot of illegal lockouts going on, a lot of other deeper problems. And unfortunately, there's actually just not as much legal assistance out there. And I think it's really kind of rearing its head is it's sort of a lot more unregulated. And I know one of the big problems that's been coming up in that area is just how rental assistance is being distributed in the Spokane area. It's been a lot slower. It seems like it's been having a lot more bureaucratic hurdles and not actually getting to the tenants and landlords who are asking for it. And it's not even clear why, but I know that they've been having a lot of those problems out there.
Yeah, anecdotally, that doesn't surprise me from what I see on my Chapter 13 bankruptcy calendars, where not just for Spokane, but also for Wenatchee. You know, so it doesn't surprise me what you say, Edmund. Thank you.
SP?
Edmund, I know that you know, ELAP and HJP has worked together quite a bit. I think it'd be helpful because I think it gives sometimes talking about the eviction and rental and all that is kind of you know, a downer. But I think part of it in the work, what it has brought out is the collaborative, the need for collaboration. So maybe if you could say a little bit about the work that HJP is doing in collaborations.
Yeah, I know, and we've been having a lot of talks about how to sort of work together, both on policy issues, but also on just providing services to tenants. You know, trying to find a way that how do we sort of maximize all our resources, also just the independence that we all have and the kind of unique viewpoints that we each have as an organization, but also be able to provide a similar shared resource to anybody who needs it. So I know with ELAB, we've been working pretty closely with a lot of the East Side groups to try to sort of provide, you know, policy guidance to some of the local city councils, but then also working closely in distributing rental assistance because you have a lot of big, you know, ELAB has a big pivotal place in the East Side of King County, especially with a lot of the renters there. So we've been trying to help, you know, basically for the rental assistance that we're doling out, your attorneys and members have been basically helping, trying to do that outreach out there. But ultimately it's been I think we're always stronger when we work together. And that's what I think I'm happy that we've really been able to sort of create that sort of strong relationship and collaboration.
Thank you, Edmund. Michael states in chat, I would also know that Edmund has been a tremendous resource for all the VLPs across the state. Thank you, Edmund. We appreciate you. Any other comments for Edmund? All right, thank you, Edmund. You can go back, you can go to that meeting at 11. Make sure you get the funding for us.
All right. Take care. Thanks all.
Thank you. All right, now we move to liaison report. I can just go over. Let's start with Oakland liaison. Judge Corbett, any report?
Yes, I went to the Civil Legal Aid Oversight Committee meeting on December 11th. There were reports from Just Lead, Team Child, NJP, LFW. I made a report on behalf of the ATJ Board, the Equal Justice Coalition. One thing that I found interesting was a comment from Jim Bamberger as this year goes and we're still dealing with COVID issues. Dealing with the legislators is going to be very different. So much of the work, those of you that have been down to Olympia, walking the grounds, knowing what's going on, with funding know that a lot of the things happen not in formal meetings with Zoom screens, but people walking across the Olympia campus, rubbing elbows with someone else or bumping into somebody and talking about how things are being done. And it's going to be an unusual year. Hopefully we don't have two of these. Thank you.
Okay, Sir, Gender and Justice.
Gender and justice is not met since our last meeting, so nothing to report.
Thank you. Michelle, Practice of Law Board.
I do not have any updates for this meeting. Thanks, Francis.
Thank you. SP, MJC, Minority and Justice Commission.
Yeah, MJC, I reported on that last month because we met a week before our last meeting. And the BGA meeting, let's see, the BGA meeting wound up happening at the same time as our board meeting, so I was not able to attend that this time around. So we'll have to wait till January. And nobody else is meeting this month.
Thank you. Terry, JISC.
The JISC is focused on the upcoming CLJ CMS, Courts of Limited Jurisdiction Case Management System, which is going to be comprehensive for all 300 of our courts of limited jurisdiction in the state. And unfortunately, my concern is it's going to lead to a digital divide where there will be more customer service and user-friendly systems in the courts of limited jurisdiction than there will be in the divided superior courts over the state. And again, something that's been talked about in this group is that what is going to help fund the CLJ CMS is going to be user fees, and that's going to affect the communities that the ATJ board and its affiliated groups are concerned about people who are working poor who are going to have to pay user fees for e-filing in this new courts of limited jurisdiction.
Judge Keenan. Judge Keenan. Okay.
Francis.
Any report on liaison report?
Oh, from the WISBA Equity and Disparity?
Yes. Yes.
No.
All right. Judge Bradley, any report from the Superior Court liaison?
So the Superior Court Judges Association Unrepresented Litigant Work Group, we did meet recently and committees reported out on what they're doing. I'm working on a committee to set up a pilot for a self-help center for Spokane County, hopefully in or near the courthouse, to avoid sending people all over the city to get help. All the committees made a commitment to doing some work between that last meeting and our next meeting, which is early in January. And so Judge Keenan might be able to report better on the work group he's been working with. I'm also liaison to the Board of Governors, and they have not met since our last meeting.
Thank you. Any other liaison before I take the Interpreters Commission? Interpreters Commission is meeting as we speak. And the reason I was late to this meeting is I had to go and make some presentation over there with regards to the fact that there's problem with regards to having access to jail for interpreters. And also there is also a problem with having interpreters available for crime victim and all the issues. Rudy is also making a presentation there today. So hopefully I will give a full report, but we make a number of recommendations to have interpreters also be on policy decisions with regard to our jail and all of that. So I'll provide a full report in January. Okay, Cesar.
Just have a quick question for Terry. I'm not sure if I missed in part of your report with regard to the transition to all the electronic filing. So, I mean, the question of extending and ensuring that GR 34 is applicable, I mean, do we need to revise the rule as a result of the changes that you see coming, or that are being not see coming, that are being implemented or in the works? Has that been a topic of discussion at this point in the process?
Cesar, I will show my ignorance. GR 34 being
it's the Superior Court rule, basically for providing for waiver of fees, court fees, filing fees and surcharges for based on indigency, and typically anyone who's qualifying for civil legal aid services would have a fee waiver pretty, expedited automatically almost, but you have to apply for it. But
sorry, the JISC did talk about that. That the fee waivers will continue for folks who are indigent, for qualified legal service providers, but there's still going to be people who won't qualify, who are going to have to pay these user fees. The other thing about e-filing is it's not user-friendly for self-represented litigants, and I'm not even sure that it's all that user-friendly for attorneys. But it's not. It's right now. Snohomish County is leading the way in this state in Odyssey courts, and they do have a mechanism for self-represented litigants to learn on their website how to file their own cases, and it's quite impressive. But they are the only county right now of the 37 using Odyssey that have that ability.
Yeah, no, thank you. You didn't, it wasn't mentioned, and I realized that there are a slew of barriers that are implicated in all of this, but it just left me wondering. So thanks for that.
Sure.
Thank you, Cesar. Any other comment for the liaison? All right, we go on to EJC. Will?
My Zoom is being very slow this morning, but thanks. I don't have a huge update other than what I've updated at previous meetings and at Disca meetings. We had a number of our monthly EJC stakeholder meetings earlier this week. We got some really good discussion and feedback on the materials we're preparing for the legislative session. As we've talked about before, and as Judge Corbett just noted, it's going to be really unusual and difficult session in a lot of ways. We're preparing our materials for virtual meetings with legislators. As I mentioned, our plan is to have those roll out after the Goldmark in mid-February, and you can look forward to the sign up for those virtual meeting lobby week and our materials going out after the new year. And I'll have much more sort of recruitment and discussion about participation in that in January. And we're also preparing sort of some additional materials about the budget request for folks to use, and some digital tools to reach out to legislators for folks who maybe aren't able to participate in meetings or want to have a sort of a script or template to send in support of the budget request. I think that's my main update. Since Jim had to leave, in terms of the state funding update, I would just post in the chat that the OPLA budget request is now reflected online in the governor's budget. So you can take a look at that, just gives a little bit more detail. What the EJC is focused on is the request for an $11 million increase over the coming biennium. And that's played in the budget in terms of, it's called pandemic legal aid services. It's to expand, maintain and expand COVID response services that have been funded this year with $10.44 million request there. And then transitioning a little over $560,000 from the eviction study that was funded in the previous biennium to support ongoing eviction defense services in response to COVID. So that's how we get to that nice round $11 million figure. That's going to be the centerpiece of our materials and requests in the session. But yeah, I will post that in the budget. And like I say, stay tuned for signups and materials for virtual lobbying starting at the beginning of January.
Thank you, Will. We now go to funding reports. Cesar.
Hate to sound a little repetitious, but at this point, practically everything I reported last time continues to be the case. We are on pins and needles regarding the, well, two things. It does look like there's going to be just a continuing resolution. They're not going to get around to pass actual budget bills. Number one, which means continued flat federal funding. But the biggest concern, of course, is what happens with the CARES Act or the HEROES Act, whatever they're going to call it this time around. And unbelievably, there's likelihood of no, well, you all are getting the news too, there's likelihood of no relief for states and local governments, which is brutal. Even the whole thing might be in question. It's not clear they're even going to have a bill in time. So it's really distressing. There's lots of other problems with it, but of course, any relief is better than none at this point, I suppose. So we're just waiting to hear, waiting to see what happens. That's all I have on the federal.
Thank you. Let's hope that we will get a good report in January. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All right. SP has some question for Cesar.
Hi, Cesar. Is there a plan B? A contingency plan?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, if the big trade-off was, there's been some really problematic perspectives in terms of relief for states and local governments on the Republican side. And there's the whole sort of attack on blue states and high spending blue states, and as well as that they're going to use the money for pension relief and things like that. And despite trying to defeat those kinds of arguments, they're just sticking with that. So what the trade-off was, the Republicans were willing to drop the sort of protection from liability for private employers and businesses, which they had been insisting on. The plan B is that the Biden administration is going to come in, and one of the very first things they're going to do is push to have relief for states and local governments. Whether that's a real plan B depends on what happens in Georgia, I suppose. So everything is completely up in the air. And it's awful because even now the costs and the impact, the health impacts are just going through the roof, given the severity of the infections and deaths across the country. So it's just mind-boggling that they couldn't do that. Already, I read a statement that in this 1 year, more local and state employees have been laid off than were laid off in 5 years following the collapse of the mortgage market in 2008. And in 1 year, we lost more positions in that concentrated just in public sector employment. And then were lost in 5 years. And it took until 2019 to recover from those employment losses. So the fact that they could even be dawdling about providing relief to state and local governments is just incredible, especially since what we're talking about is since budgets have to be balanced, it's layoffs of cops, teachers, healthcare workers. This is what governments are having to do around the country. So it's just an abysmal situation in that regard, on top of other abysmal situations.
Any other question, comment for Cesar? Thank you, Cesar.
Thank you.
Natalia is standing in for Melinda today. So Natalia, Campaign for Equal Justice report.
Yeah, hi everyone. Update on Campaign for Equal Justice. We have surpassed our annual goal of 1.8 million this year, and we raised 1.85. So thank you to everyone, and we're still seeing the money pour in, which is exciting. It's the end of year, so that's when we get the most funding anyway. So big thank you to everyone who worked on our law firm campaigns, who's helped us with Goldmark, filling tables, and any other efforts that you've helped us with this year. It's huge. Most we've raised since I've been here. Registration for Goldmark Award event opened yesterday. So I will drop the link in the chat for you. It's free to register, as always. We are honoring Lem Howell this year with the Goldmark Award, and we have Doug Baldwin as our keynote speaker, that former Seattle Seahawk player and social justice advocate. So it's going to be a pretty fun lineup. Update, our law firm campaign in King and Pierce is going really well. We're close to our $650,000 goal, with over 100 law firms contributing again this year. And on the endowments side, the Reach 20 initiative has hit its goal of $5 million. So that's huge. Big thank you to everyone who's worked on this initiative over the past 5 years. It's been 5 years in the making, and they hit that $5 million mark most recently. Over 600 donors have contributed and are continuing to pay down their pledges over the last 5 years. So a big thank you to the folks on the board of the endowment, and then also to all of the donors who continue to support that work and that long-term fund for legal aid in our state. There'll be another session of the Race Equity Series happening in February, so stay tuned for that. And that concludes my update.
I have a question that's maybe of benefit to everyone here. So you made me go through an experience yesterday that blew my mind. I can actually have a web page that I can use to solicit funding for, for racial justice, for equal justice, and that page, everyone on this meeting can have their own page before Goldmark, which they can use to solicit. Can you explain that a little bit so that others can benefit the way I did?
Francis, your T-Rex voice is
My T-Rex is back.
Yes, your T-Rex is back.
Natalia, go ahead and explain.
Yeah, I got it. I understood what you were saying. I speak T-Rex. So that's right. For the Goldmark event this year, it's virtual, as I think you know, and we've set up these fundraising pages that I just dropped the link in the chat. So you can go to this page and you click the Become a Fundraiser tab, and it'll walk you through. It's about 3 steps to set up. You set up your account. There's you can change your profile picture. You can put in your own name. Francis was the first person to set up a page for us. So thank you, Francis, you rock. So go to this page and check it out. We're just getting started. You can see our big goal there, $400,000 to raise for the event. So this will be a key place where we raise funds for the Goldmark event. Virtual events are so different than in-person events when it comes to the fundraising strategy, as folks on this call might be familiar with your organization's transitioning to virtual. So a lot of what happens is 75 to 85% of the funds we try to raise in advance of the event to hit that ultimate goal. So that's the reason why we're pushing out these virtual fundraising pages. And this is really the best way that people who have been table captains in the past can help us this year. This is, we hope this would serve as your virtual table. So you can send it to the people who would normally sit at your table. You can set your own fundraising goal on that page. It's all editable. You can make it whatever you wish. You can make it higher or lower. We've set a goal of 2,500 for each person, just as a template. So go ahead and adjust that. But give it a try. You can share the page on social media. You can share it with your folks through email. There are email templates and social media templates in the program. So once you sign up for a page, you'll have access to those. You can copy and paste it into your email, copy and paste the post into your social media. So we're hoping this is pretty easy for y'all, and happy to support you, of course, in any way. So if you click into it and you don't understand or you have a question, just let me know. I have a lot of different setup guides available as well. So if you want more information, I can email you those too.
I love it. I love that I can set my own fundraising goal and invite my friend to help me reach that goal. What I couldn't do is to be able to set a fundraising goal for Sal and set it so high so that I can bring all his rich friends to do it. Right? But it was really cool. And I want to encourage everyone to do that. Sal, you can comment.
No, not on that, but I don't even need to say this, but just out of abundance of caution, I know that we have 100% giving from this board, either for the campaign, for the endowment. So just in case anyone has just forgotten to do that, please do that, because historically it's so important. And again, it doesn't matter how much you give, it's just important that you give and be part of the campaign. So I just wanted to remind everybody about that. And Francis, I'm gonna invite you to my table now, okay? So you gotta sit at yours and mine.
No, you don't get to do that. I'm a table captain, you're a table captain. Your goal should be higher than everybody here. All right, thank you.
I'm loving this. Thank you, guys.
I think we should have a race between Sal and, and somebody else, and Terry, to see who can raise more fund than anyone else. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Natalia. We appreciate your presentation. I don't see Caitlin. I think we've covered it, right, Natalia? Did Caitlin has anything for you to present for her?
No, I didn't have any notes from Caitlin.
All right. Thank you. We are expecting OA to come here, to be with us at 11 a.m. But before we get to him, and I should have informed the board at our working session earlier this morning, we lost Paula Littlewood this week, and I took it upon myself on behalf of the board to send a letter to the family to let them know how much she's loved and she's missed, and that our thoughts and prayers are with the family. She did a lot for access to justice in our states, and she's always on the forefront of access and always very supportive of the board. Many times we have had to reach out to her. She's always there for us, and it's a very sad loss. And so if you know her family, you can also reach out to her. And anything else? Dana, anything else I miss?
No, if you don't have the way to reach the family, then just let me know and I'll be sure to send that to you.
Thank you. It's a very sad loss, and I believe that we will continue to stand for the family. All right. We are waiting for OA. Any other announcements before OA join us? Lindy, I see Lindy waiting to speak.
Nope, I'm good. Thanks, Francis.
You're welcome, Lindy. Any other announcements? And I want to emphasize some of, we have been including committee schedules in our meeting notices. So this committee meets every first Tuesday of the month at 3:30. Technology Committee meets third Tuesday every other month. Rules Committee meets third Tuesday every other month. And I believe the ATJ Conference Planning Committee have a standard meeting time now, Bonnie, right? The ATJ Conference Planning Committee, and people are free to join the subcommittees of ATJ Conference Planning Committee. Bonnie, can you provide information on that?
Yeah, so that's the third Thursday of the month at noon. And they meet for 1 hour.
Thank you. So you can join any of the subcommittees of the Conference Planning Committee. There is a lot of activities going on. There is always a way you can plug in. So Bonnie, are we going to wait for OA, or can we push this to next month?
Yeah, I know he said he was coming from another meeting and he'd be here at 11. So I don't know if you want to give it another minute. He might just be running late. I haven't heard from him otherwise this morning.
Right. We have covered everything that we needed to cover today. And if anyone has any announcement, let me know. SP, go ahead.
No, I don't have an announcement. I was just trying to think, what can we do in the interim? You know, has anybody done anything special in preparation for the holidays? You know, do you have a?
Thank you, SP. Diana has some suggestions. Yes, Diana.
Oh, well, I'm just letting you know that I texted Jorge to see if he's coming, and he says yes. So let's not end our meeting. And then the other idea I had is, I'm totally putting Hickory on the spot, but since Hickory is new, it'd be great to give him a little time just to introduce himself, because it's exciting that NJP has a new deputy director.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Hickory, please introduce yourself.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I guess I'll extend it a little beyond the initial introduction. Well, for the past, I guess, 8.5 years, I've been really focused on serving young people in Washington, particularly those that have experienced homelessness or foster care. And that's been in a couple of different ways. I worked at the Center for Children and Youth Justice for a few years, running its legal aid program called Lawyers Fostering Independence, where we worked with a lot of attorneys in the community to provide pro bono assistance to our clients. So I did some direct representation, but also managed a large group of attorneys in offering pro bono counsel to our clients. At the same time, I was on the board of directors for the Mockingbird Society, which is really focused on inviting and empowering young people who have lived and experienced the systems that they're trying to change, and believing that their lived expertise is what's needed at the table and had historically been absent from the conversation. And so Mockingbird really paved the way long before I got there to do that. But while I was there, we were able to just continue advancing that work and getting better at it, and winning a lot of great policies and changes to the perceptions and practices that work against the full potential of young people. Prior to that, I did civil litigation here in Seattle, focused on constitutional appellate advocacy. I clerked for a few years in a couple of years in the federal court for Judge Benjamin Settle, as well as at the Supreme Court for the Honorable Associate Chief Justice Charles Johnson. Graduated from Seattle U in law school with a joint degree, MBA and JD in 2008. I have 2 wonderful boys, River and Aspen, that are 4.5 and 15 months. And my wife also works in public service in law enforcement oversight here in Seattle. And I'm really excited to be a part of NJP. I have been a longtime fan, and they had supported many of our clients in a variety of ways, and we've been able to partner. And so to be able to join the organization and be here and continuing to advance the work with all of the different partnerships that exist in our broader community is just really an amazing thing to me, to be to be here now, and I'm excited to continue work with many of you who I've had a chance to have paths cross with before, and I'm looking forward to what we'll be able to do together. I'm very much in listening and learning mode right now, and just trying to learn more about how I can best support the work of NJP as well as the broader community. So thanks for having me, and thank you, Diana, for inviting me to share a little bit more about myself. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ikori. We
Thank you, Francis.
welcome you to the family. Right, Oye is finally with us. It's worth the wait, man. There you go, you got the floor.
Thank you so much, and I apologize. Thank you, Francis, and I apologize for the delay. I appreciate you guys must be ahead of schedule, because I thought I was at the end of the agenda. So great job in facilitating. Thank you for the invitation to give you an update on things from Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. We've had, so I'll just quickly, I'm mostly going to focus my remarks on updates on some work that we're doing around the Daca program, because there's been some changes, but I did want to give you a couple of updates on some of our impact litigation work, because we've had some, a couple of good victories. We recently got, actually yesterday got a decision from, we've been participating in this kind of national litigation on a case challenging the administrations, the federal administrations, not complying with the Freedom of Information Act in terms of releasing records to people who are going through immigration proceedings. And this might seem like a kind of a technical issue, right, in terms of like releasing records, but the problem is that it has a real detrimental impact on people who are going through the immigration system, because even if you're facing a deportation hearing, you don't have the kind of like right to like discovery that you might have in other contexts. And so the government could have information that's really relevant to your case, and the pathways to file a FOIA request. That's what they tell you is go, file FOIA. And, but there's been just extensive delays where they don't comply at all. And so people would file individual actions to try to force the government to do the records, and then eventually the records would be released. But that required, individual actions every time, which is, hugely time consuming, and not, many people can't afford or able to do that. And so this was a class action to basically try to challenge this on a systemic level. And Judge Orrick, a federal judge in San Francisco yesterday, issued a summary judgment and ordered the government to begin, it's basically requiring them to comply with the law, which, we shouldn't need to have a judge do that, but that's basically what this will be. And so we're hoping that this will actually resolve this issue at a national level, which will help clients and individuals across the country do better and have access to the information they need to be able to defend themselves in immigration court. So that was exciting. We also received some good words of the government trying to settle this other case that we had to file on another, frustrating and annoying thing where the government was rejecting forms in immigration proceedings because people would leave a space blank. So let's say you weren't married, they require you to put it like none or NA, even if like you had indicated earlier that you were single, and so they're rejecting all these forms, and it was causing headaches to people. And we again had to file a lawsuit on that, and they've now responded that they're planning on basically putting that on hold. And of course, we're hoping that a new administration will come in and make better policy decisions. So those are a couple of quick updates on the impact litigation front, but I mostly wanted to focus on the situation with the Daca program, because there's been some changes, and it's a little bit of a roller coaster situation with folks who are eligible. So as many of you know, the administration has been driving over the past few years to try to terminate the program. They were stymied by litigation that was filed by a number of partners, including the State Attorney General's office here in Washington, that essentially put the termination on pause. And what it did, it meant that the people who were already in the program could continue. Sorry if you hear some background, that's my 7-year-old who's doing second grade near me here. Let me just close this a little bit so we get less interference. So over the past, almost 3.5 years, people have been able to continue renewing if they were already in the Daca program. But what they have not been able to do is people who qualify for the program but had never applied. There have been no initial applications available since September of 2017. And so we had significant thousands, we think, here in Washington, and probably hundreds of thousands, if not more, in the United States, who have met the requirements for the program, but could not submit an initial application while all of this was pending. So there's been, after the Supreme Court's decision this summer that basically said the termination attempt by the administration was improper, there was further litigation, and there was a case out of New York where a judge in New York a couple of weeks ago issued a decision saying that the government was now going to be required to take on initial applications. And actually that's being complied with now. So we've been trying to respond to that need of a lot of people wanting to file initial applications now. The challenge is that there's a separate legal case, that is the state of Texas, that is trying to get a federal judge to actually block the Daca program and prevent people from applying. And so we have this looming threat of this other litigation that could potentially, it's basically like the judge in New York opened the door, and then, this other judge may shut the door. We just don't know when or how exactly. And so that case has a hearing on Tuesday, on the 22nd. We don't know when the ruling will come, or, we don't know what the ruling will be, but because this judge has previously issued rulings that were not favorable to a program similar to Daca, there's high concern that the window may close. So all to say that right now we're in this situation where we're doing kind of a push to help as many people as we can. We couldn't do individual sessions, and we also couldn't do in-person group events, which is what we have done in the past. So what we've been doing has been virtual events. So we had a legal workshop yesterday in English. We have another one scheduled for today in Spanish, to basically help as many people as possible understand how to complete the forms themselves, prepare the applications themselves, which is not ideal in that we'd love to be able to provide individual assistance, but there isn't enough time because, we want to try to help as many people as we can apply before the window might close, to do so. And so that's been the effort, is to try to connect people to resources despite the uncertainty. And of course, after the new year, see what happens with this Texas litigation, and of course, what changes the new administration will make, because we might be in a situation where the new administration wants to reopen the program, but the Texas case blocks them from doing so. And so it's an unfortunate, ongoing, uncertain situation that the community is in. We're trying our best to provide the opportunity for people to apply. I think there's a big debate in the immigration bar, frankly, about whether it makes sense to apply now or not. But our position has been that that's ultimately clients' decision with good information, and that if we refuse to help them now, we're sort of making the decision for them by not providing them an opportunity to be able to apply. So our focus has been on providing opportunity for people to be able to apply if they choose to, and provide good information about the risks and benefits, and then let them make the choice. And I know a number of people have gone forward. So that's my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
SP?
Jorge, gracias. So would you advise people, given the doors open and not sure what's going to happen in Texas, would you advise people to apply now if you haven't already applied, and see if they can squeeze in during this possible short window without knowing what's going to happen?
Yeah, thank you, SP. So I had somebody ask me exactly that question, like, what would you do? And what I told them is like, what we're telling people is basically this. So if you clearly meet the criteria, right? Like there's no doubt and you have all the documentation, you're ready to apply right now. And you're comfortable with the risk that, because the problem is that even if you submit your application today, there's a chance by the time they process this will be months now that it'll be processed, right? And so it's very likely that there could be a ruling that says the program will be blocked. And if that happens, it's also possible that the person may lose their application fee and not be able to do it. So the rationale for applying now is that perhaps you will be somehow grandfathered in, right? Because you submitted the application already, that they and if they've like received it by the time this ruling comes down, you know, it might give you a shot to remain in the program or to be grandfathered in. We have no idea if that's how the ruling might, you know, if the ruling might allow for that. And so people just need to understand that there's a risk. So, but what I have told people who ask me exactly that question is I said, you know, if you understand that risk, right, and you're comfortable with the fact that your application fee, you might lose your application fee. I think that it's worth it to try to give yourself a chance. But I totally understand if people, you know, decide that they want to wait and see what happens with the Texas case before going forward, and you do need to understand the risks. And so if you, that's why we think that it's only if it's somebody who has like a clean case with no criminal history, no contact, no prior deportations, and really no questions about eligibility. Only in that situation would I say to move forward. If you have any of those other risk factors, our advice has been to hold off and wait, because then there might be a risk that that could put that person in the radar of immigration in a way that could make them an enforcement priority.
Thank you.
Terry?
Thank you, Jorge, for all your work. Two questions. So you've previously talked to us about the public charge rule. Did I read that a judge struck down the public charge rule?
Yeah, so the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld or actually kind of put in place back an injunction regarding the public charge rule. There's a little bit of a debate. So technically, the rule shouldn't be in effect, but the government still has a chance to keep appealing that further. So right now we're kind of in this like limbo stage. Even the immigration attorneys on the listserv, people are questioning as to whether they think that they need to submit the additional documentation that was required by the public charge rule. We've been kind of holding off to see what happens with that case, because I feel like the community has already had this like back and forth of it's in effect, it's not in effect, it's not in effect. And I think given that it's still a little unclear, we're waiting to see, you know, what the administration does, and obviously also preparing for the new administration, and hopefully taking action to settle those cases in a way that basically will make the public charge rule go away. It's actually kind of a complicated issue because the regulation is out there, and normally the administration would be having to defend that, but we're hoping that the new administration will decide to figure out a way to undo that damage. And so I think people are a little tentative on sending a kind of clear message until some of those issues get resolved, because I feel like the uncertainty and the back and forth sometimes has created even more confusion in the community. And so a lot of us have been waiting to see that there's a little bit more clarity on what's going to happen before we put out a clear message out there.
Thanks for that update. And yes, we can hope the new administration just makes it all go away. The second issue, and you may not feel comfortable talking about this, but apparently this morning, the Supreme Court kicked the census case out. And so does this just create confusion? Any idea what's going to happen?
Well, so I think a couple of things. So I think on the sort of legal issue, I still think that the court, I feel like the court is sort of like saying like, we don't want to deal with this until it's clear that we really have to resolve the issue, right? They definitely left the door open. And while I think the press reporting is that this is kind of a victory for the administration, the reality is that I think there was a sense that maybe this isn't going to happen anyway. And so, you know, the court is like, you know, we may not even, the administration may not even be able to do this. So why are we gonna make a ruling? I think the damage is still the problem out in the community is that, you know, they're like the government's sort of trying to track the people down and somehow, you know, the sense. So there's two kinds of damage that could happen. Obviously, there's the direct impact of like if the administration, the Trump administration actually makes this happen, it could have a profound impact on redistricting and political power. But I think there's still mechanisms and the court decision could, you know, they could still come back and block that, right? But I think more broadly, I think part of my concern with all of this things that the administration's tried to do is that it has left this fear in the community, right? That they are like things like the census are, you know, the government's trying to like track people down and identify people, and the public charge thing is part of that. And so I think the damage that it's going to do, even on things like that are kind of unrelated, but you know, things like vaccination, right? Like. And I think some of you may have heard that the CDC had wanted to get like information of people for vaccination. And so there's this fear in the community that there's just this, you know, sense that like people are being trying to track down, et cetera. And I think that damage, while even a new administration may try to roll back some of those policies, I think that part of the damage could be very, very long lasting, unfortunately.
Thank you. And thanks for all your work on this.
Thank you all for the support to make it happen.
Right. Any other comments or questions for Oye? Right. Thank you, everyone. I think we have come to the end of the meeting. We are finishing 8 minutes ahead of time. So I'll take that. All right. Just as an FYI, Judge Keenan and I believe we are on a remote trial work group that is going to be meeting, and hopefully if anybody have any ideas and suggestions, please, you can send it to me or to Judge Keenan with regards to remote trial hearing and how we can improve that system. Yes, go ahead, Judge Keenan.
Well, we should clarify, it's really centered on remote jury trials. So not so much bench trials, and we haven't met yet. It'll be led by Judge Cannell from Division 3.
So if anyone have any ideas and suggestions on remote jury trial, please send it to us, and we would do our best to push access to civil justice in jury trial as much as we could. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Happy holidays. Enjoy, and Happy New Year in advance. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.